The 2024 United Nations Climate Change Conference, or the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC, more commonly known as COP29, is the 29th United Nations Climate Change Conference. Now, COP29 has been held currently in Baku, Azerbaijan from the 11th to 22nd November 2024, so it's still ongoing. Now, this summit is a crucial moment for African youths to advocate for climate action and demand change from policymakers. And as the youngest continent, Africa is disproportionately affected by climate change, despite contributing minimally to the global emissions. Now, this summit provides an opportunity for youth activists to be heard and have their demands met by those in power. But the question is, what are these demands? And these are the things that we'll be discussing right here on Fanua today. This is Fanua Afrika, the show where we spotlight the youth across the African continent, their challenges, their opportunities, and of course, the problems that need to be solved on the continent. My name is Blessings Musugu, and I'm your host on the show, and I would like for you to sit tight and relax as we take. Now, despite all the obstacles that we mentioned before, African youths have successfully raised public awareness and influenced policy changes. Their involvement in climate decision-making is crucial, and the COP29 summit is a vital platform for their voices to be heard. Now, by participating in the summit, African youth can actually ensure that their concerns are addressed and that policymakers prioritize climate change. And this is their chance to shape a sustainable future and guarantee their livelihoods. I mean, we've always said it that the youth need to be included in decision-making processes. So it's not just about being in the room, but about having their voices heard as well. And hopefully COP29 can also give that avenue. Well, joining us to discuss this, I have some guests with me. I have Israel Olani, the co-founder, Youth for Sustainable Development Action Africa, joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much, Israel, for joining us.
Very much. A blessing.
An absolute pleasure. All right, we also have another gentleman, Prince Mustafa Audu, the CEO, Electric Motor Vehicle Company, and he's currently in Azerbaijan at the COP29 summit in Baku. Thank you so much for joining us, Prince. All right, it's a pleasure to have you join us. I mean, I can see you waving, but I can't hear you yet. Please help me check your device if you're muted. All right, we also have joining us Okotie Wenyimi, Clean Air Program Manager, also at Azerbaijan COP29 Summit. Thank you so much, Okotie, for joining us.
Yeah, and thanks for having me in the show.
An absolute pleasure. All right, gentlemen, we will just go straight to the conversation. Now, I'm going to start by asking Israel. Israel, what do you think are the top priorities for African youths at the COP29 summit this year?
Thanks so much, Blessing. I think it's time that we begin to uplift African youths to help drive effective action in terms of climate change, because largely what you find is people who come to the table, and especially those in the global north, come to the table and then they make very interesting, agreements, and then they don't follow through, because largely in terms of financing, there's been a lot of commitment, but not so much, application and implementation. So largely what I see happening is that youths are demanding for increased accountability on the part of those who make these policies and agreements. Let's start taking actions, and let's start putting our money where our mouth is, and that's what I think is a priority now for African youths at COP29. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for that. Also, let me ask Prince Mustafa Audu, seeing as you are on ground at the COP29 summit currently, what do you think the youths are mostly talking about? What are the conversations going on in the midst of the youths?
To all Nigerians. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, first of all, the Conference of the Parties, which is COP, is here specifically to address climate issues. The actors that can actually make a real difference are young people, having to empower young people to effectively carry out the changes that are required in terms of sustainability, renewable energy, a sector like mine, like e-mobility, It's essential that you have young people that are the ones carrying out these actions. We're the ones that have the capacity to deliver on these projects. So it's essential, young people feel that this is the time that they should be included in the conversation. Just like Rukaya is being shown there on the video, Rukaya Rufai. She's part of a board, part of the high-level discussions to try and get young people to be part of the conversation. The implementation of all of these things that we discuss can only be carried out by young people, but there is some little divide. Young people truly are not, part of the decision-making process. So I guess this is why this kind of conference is very essential, to carry young people along, because you want people to implement something, but they are not part of that decision-making process. It's going to be a challenge, it's going to be a difficulty. So I encourage young people to stand up. We just had a session yesterday when we're talking about the involvement. If you look at the House of Representatives, a lot of them are young people in Nigeria. So we have some young people in office that have the capacity to make a difference, but we need to reach critical mass. Not a lot of young people are involved in the decision-making process or even carrying out the activities that are needed to make the real change. So Nigeria needs to carry our youth along a lot more than we're doing now. It's not that we're not carrying young people along. Young people are being carried along, but we haven't reached critical mass. There's a number that you reach that it now becomes part of an essential part of the conversation, an essential part of the implementation. This is what we want. This is what young people are clamoring for, to be able to change their lives, because at the end of the day, this planet is for young people. This planet, it's be us and our children and their children's children that would be the ones that would be left with this country and with the planet and with the issues that it's currently facing. So government needs to make active decisions, need to make the right choices as well, because there's also policy flip-flop. One government has one policy, the next government has another policy. There's no consistency. So without consistency, you can't carry people along over the long term. So it's essential that we are part of the conversation, but not just part of the conversation, an essential part of its implementation. By the time we implement these things, then we understand truly what we're fighting for, what we're working for, and why it is essential to build a better, more inclusive planet for all of us.
All right, thank you so much for that as well. Now, Okotie Wemi, you are also at the COP29 summit. What do you think the specific climate actions are that the African youth are expecting from their governments this year?
Thanks once again. The African youth expect a lot. Just like my colleagues had explained earlier on just now. We expect a renewed commitment to youth leadership and to inclusive policies that allow for delivering some of the key issues we're working to manage right now, like climate, greenhouse gas mitigation, adaptation, and also resilience. And I believe that this also involves skills development that allow for young Africans to take leadership roles in implementing solutions, and that will keep our planets below the 1.5 degrees centigrade we're talking about. And then, I remember your question again, and then speaking about what we need to do, we also want to see reduction in emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and then there's also the talk about loss and damage or climate finance. As youths, we want an increased quantity of financing for climate greenhouse gas mitigation, and also adaptation and resilience, like I said earlier, or not just the quantity of the funds, but also the quality of the funds. And what do I mean? It's very possible that we see situations where African governments get funding for climate issues or for climate interventions rather, and then we find out that most of these funds are actually debts, loans that lead to debt in our countries. So we are calling out for more grants, but also calling out for real solutions, funding of real solutions that are well tailored for the African situation. Speaking about loss and damage, we could also see that Africa has produced just the least amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Historical data shows that, but then we bear the brunt of the issue of climate change. We are most vulnerable to climate change. That's why continents like Africa and the Global South even needs more finance to actually meet its nationally determined contributions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Now let me come back to Israel. We've discussed what the youth are clamoring for majorly, but the question here is how exactly can the climate summit, COP29 in this case, address the unique challenges faced by the African youth? We've had so many discussions around the fact that, the COP summits are usually just, one where we just go and have conversations upon conversations and no action is being taken. So how can the COP29 address most, if not all, of these challenges?
Thank you very much, Bessie. What I'll say is that, first of all, I think there has to be a lot of spotlighting of youth-led initiatives. Beyond just having meetings and committees coming together and discussing, let's start trying to actually, help youth to drive solutions that work. Across Nigeria, we see young people who are doing great stuff. I mean, across adaptation, mitigation, even resilience, across industries. But there's not a lot of spotlight of what they're doing. So it's still scale and it's not spreading across. And then there's not government support in terms of financing and mentorship. So I think at COP, what I would like to see is having youths at the table and then helping to spotlight those that are actually working. Very, very active initiatives that are doing great stuff across the divide, especially in global south, in Nigeria and across Africa. If we don't put our youth at the forefront, we would have actually just come and talk. And I see that happen every year where we have lots of discussion across different commitments, and then people will say, I'll give this, I'll give that. But after COP, it's like a circle that continues running. COP28 has passed, this COP29, we must leave that in place with active initiatives that actually work, things that can be mass-produced or scaled across Africa, led by youths, financing for it, mentorship for it, but largely spotlighting it so that it can be seen by all and then get to work. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that as well. Now, Prince Mustafa Aldu, we have spoken extensively about the role of COP29, about the role of the governments of the different countries, but what role can the African youths themselves play in shaping climate policies? Prince Mustafa, can you please unmute your device?
Apologies.
It's fine.
I've unmuted. Like I was saying, the power is actually in our hands as young people. We have the ability to make a real difference. If you take what we're doing, we started electric vehicles when no one believed that, electric vehicles would be a success in Nigeria. Today, we're the largest producers of electric vehicles in the country. We've also sold the most EVs, and this is about taking the bull by the horns. Likewise, for young people, in terms of policy making, in terms of working with government, we've worked with several government agencies and ministries to help pass policies that are influential to the e-mobility sector, to help have zero duty, zero VAT, other things that help to give an advantage. There's a new tax policy now, an exemption for electric vehicles. So these things can be done, but you have to take an active role. If you don't take an active role, rules will be made for you. And then you have to live with the rules, where in a world where you must have rules. So if you don't participate in setting the rules, someone will set those rules, and then you have to live with it. So for us, we are the experts in e-mobility, in electric vehicles. We know that, our leaders don't know so much about it. That's why we're here. We're here to guide them. We're here to work hand in hand with our leaders to make sure that the right policy is implemented, to make sure that the right laws are put in place to help guide the sector and grow the sector. So likewise, in any other field that young people are involved in, whether it be renewable energy, in terms of solar, in terms of hydro, whatever it is that you're working in, whatever sector you are involved in, there is an element of climate change in that sector. So how can you just go beyond working with the rules that are available to creating, the kind of rules that help, to spur growth and development in that environment. So it is critical. The only way we can make a change, the only way that you can influence this is by taking an active role. Find out who is in charge of which committee, whether it's the Senate, the House of Representatives, whether it's what agency. I'll give you a typical example for us. We have a committee in the House of Representatives. We have a committee in the Senate. We also have an agency, National Automotive Design Development Council, that is there to help us. We also have NCCC, National Council on Climate Change. We are working hand in hand with all of these agencies to make sure that the rules and the laws that are put in place that affects our sector, we form part of that decision-making process by giving them the kind of information that they need, the kind that we spend years gathering and understanding that they are not aware of. There's no leader in the world that knows everything. There's no human being that knows everything. It's impossible. But leadership means finding the right people, listening to those people, and working hand in hand with them to make sure that the deliverables to the people are what is acceptable. So likewise, I encourage young people to take an active role in Nigeria, hand in hand with whoever is involved. It's not always federal government or president that is, in charge of all our welfare. Personally, we can make a difference. And the only way we can make that difference is by taking active roles so that when our leaders see what we're doing, they have no choice but to queue up behind us to support us for a better country and better livelihood for all young people. That's what we want. We want a better planet. We want better decision-making process. But without young people being involved in that, if you look at Kenya and other places like that, you find a lot of young people, South Africa, a lot of young people are involved in the decision-making process simply because they are part of the conversation. But a lot of us are not part of that conversation. But when the results come out on what we're meant to do, we kick against it because maybe it's not truly representative or indicative of what we want. But no one can sit in a place and make rules that affect us and we think that it will work for us without us actually partaking in that process. If you want something to succeed and you want it to succeed for you, be part of the conversation. That's what everyone is doing around the world. If you want something changed, get up, stand up, speak up to it, in a non-violent way, in a constructive way, in a way that you can get your point across to the other party, that they know that you're here. Whatever you're saying is for their benefit, your benefit, and the benefit of the country as a whole. That's what we want. And I believe that that's the way that we can achieve that.
All right. That said, let me come to Waimi. I think that it's okay to ask the question, how are the African youth affected by the climate change in their daily lives? Because I don't think a lot of people understand the impact on the youth, on the people themselves. It's one thing for it to be impacting the country as a whole, to be impacting the continent and then the globe, but how are the people, especially the youths, being affected by the climate change?
Okay, thanks for that question. You asked a question initially stating that the COP is seen as a jamboree. People just come and have conversations. But then sometimes we imagine what will the world be without the COP, or what will the world be without meetings like this? And we realize that if you check very well, people have gone to war for environmental issues, people are still going to war for having issues in crisis on environmental issues. Even in Nigeria, we face some security issues as a result of climate change. So for the youth, physically, there's so many ways we experience the impacts of climate change. Even children are really also bear the brunt. And first of all, the health risk associated with rising temperatures, extreme weather events. We'll talk about heat stress. Most of us don't understand how that affects us, but heat stress, whether you realize it or not, heat stress affects us. Also, this affects our mental health as well. Then we've not talked about displacements. People here, we have what we call environmental refugees. Some people have left in their area because there's no access to water. There have been droughts. Some people have evacuated their area that we've experienced in Nigeria, sometimes floods. Youth are affected by these things. A youth who is supposed to be focused on his own career is now focused on looking for staying in a refugee camp, getting himself to them. And this also, if not managed, then you find youth going to social vices. So then we also have, like I said, loss of education. Someone who should be studying in school is now a dropout because of environmental issues. It sounds far away, but people are experiencing this from dry areas, people who experience drought, desertification. You've not talked about people, maybe youth who are into farming. Then, as a result of desertification, cannot provide or produce as much food as they could produce. Even poultry farmers, for example, heat can affect their birds. And that's another effect so agriculturally, climate change has a huge impact. And also it impacts the capacity of nations or people farmers to produce food. And we know that youth are at the center of agriculture globally, not just Nigeria. And like I said, livelihoods and also violence. I talked about violence, social violence. So when people have been impacted by climate change and do not have the support system to get back to themselves, they could easily fall for social vices or peer pressure and go into several lifestyles that was not planned for them initially. What else? We see some of us are also attached to our culture. So our culture, if maybe our cultural heritage sites can also be affected by the issue of climate change, where people have to migrate from where their forefathers have lived and they are used to living in a certain way in that environment. So there are so many effects of climate change, and it exacerbates inequalities. We want to talk about climate injustice or climate justice, and it affects generation generally. So climate change affects us one way or the other, whether we realize it or we do not realize it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so back to you now, Israel. At the moment, what would you say are the most pressing climate-related concerns for the African youths?
Thank you very much, Blessing. I'll say, first of all, I think Africa is largely agrarian, and food security is a very big issue. Currently, it's not yet very pronounced, but it's gaining momentum, and it will become more intense as the year goes by, because we find that climate change is affecting agriculture in many ways, and there's not much being done in that regard. We are still coping, and the fact is that Africa contributes less than 4% to the global emissions, carbon emissions, and then we are largely, in fact, I think 7 of the 10 most vulnerable countries in the world are in Africa. And that means that Africa is largely a young population. We have youths, I think, over 60%. And that means that the future is not secure if food is an issue. So top on the list is food security. There has to be something done in that regard. I mean, I've come across young people who are championing initiatives in that regard, who are trying to help solve that problem. And I think we should amplify that a lot more. And then secondly, I think job creation, because we are calling for very audacious climate ambitions for Africa. I mean, for Nigeria, for example, we are talking about the just transitional net zero. It's going to be a lot, because Nigeria is largely dependent on this local economy that rely heavily on crude oil, palm oil, and if you're going to say we should switch, it can't be radical. It has to be just, in terms that we are considering the unique socio-economic context of Nigeria, Africa, and then looking at how do we transit to clean energy without affecting those who can't even fend for themselves. Poverty is a big issue. People don't have what to eat. People don't have jobs. Youths are largely unemployed. So there has to be a lot of work in terms of balancing development with climate ambition. So job creation is very paramount. And then lastly, I think I'll talk about disaster management in terms of the impacts of climate change, especially on healthcare. It's still not pronounced as we think it should be, because healthcare is like one of the major nucleus of an economy. If a country is not healthy, then there's a big problem. And climate change has robust impact on healthcare. And so I think there has to be a lot of ways to get youth involved to help design solutions that actually bridge that gap, because climate change affects largely every part of our lives, from agriculture to energy to health to education. So we must start thinking in terms of like a broad mainstreaming of climate change. So, and I like what Triple C is currently doing. They're trying to bring together all of the key players across sectors to help drive solutions that actually work. But I think we should do a lot more in terms of getting youth involved, and youth actually available, because last week I was at the conference where we had some people come talk about their work on climate change, and I see and hear people talk about very interesting stuff. But I like to see the government actually create a platform to get youth more involved in not just being in a room to just hear discussions, but to actually contribute actively to driving every form of implementation. And I think if we can do that, we will be able to tackle those key issues: job creation, and food security, and disaster management, and I call it just transition, trying to ensure that Nigeria's unique energy poverty is considered to actually help to design things that actually work for Nigeria, locally driven, community contextual, that helps to drive real solutions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Gentlemen, we'll still continue the conversation, but in the meantime, we want to go on a very quick break. When we come back, we're talking about the COP29 summit, so don't go anywhere. Many thanks for staying with us. We're still discussing the COP29 summit, which is also known as the 29th conference of the parties as a United Nations climate change conference, where countries gather to discuss and agree on global efforts to address climate change. And we're trying to streamline it to how this affects the youth across the African continent. It's one thing to be represented in the room, the COP29 summit, but it's another thing to have their voices heard. But like I said, the question remains, what are they demanding? Well, we still have our guests with us. We have Israel Olaniyo, the co-founder, Youth for Sustainable Development Action Africa, joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. We also have Prince Mustafa Audu, who is the CEO, Electric Motor Vehicle Company, joining us from Azerbaijan at the COP29 summit. Also joining us from the summit itself is Okotie Wayime, who is the Clean Air Program Manager. Well, gentlemen, we have been having an extensive conversation regarding the effects of climate change and the role of the youth, the role that the youths play in tackling this problem. Now, I'm going to come back to Israel. Israel, how prepared are the African youths to actually participate and make their voices heard at the COP29 discussions? Because it's one thing to say that the youths must be heard. It's another thing for the youth to be prepared and ready to speak up and demand whatever it is that they're clamoring for. So how prepared do you think they are?
Yeah, I think that youths are very prepared in terms of activity and participation. First of all, if you check, the number of those who actually are at COP currently, the young people, there are a lot of them. I've been following, updates. I'm a member of Yongo. Yongo is the youth constituency of the UN Climate Change Council, and I've been following, my team, seeing their engagements at various, committee meetings, various negotiations. Youths are largely hyped, and what they're calling for is that we go beyond rhetoric, beyond the discussions. Let's have actual steps, measurable steps that we can, hold our leaders accountable. And, by the level of, first of all, those are at COP currently, and secondly, the level of, online engagement that I've seen, youth calling for various initiatives. It shows that we are they're actually ready to get involved and be at the forefront to help drive solutions about. Because if the world is going to what's the word now, be safe for us all to live in the future, those will be there are the youths, not those that are currently at the forefront of the conversations. We will live in the future of the world, however it is. So we are prepared. We are ready to get involved. And as chance comes about, as there are opportunities, we will seize it. But first of all, is to get into the room where the real talk and the real work is being done. So I think we are largely prepared. We are very, very. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me come to Prince Mustafa Audu. How would you say that the African youths can ensure that their voices are heard and their demands actually account for something? Because, I mean, we've said it before that the climate summit itself is like a gathering where we just discuss and then nothing is done about it. But what are the follow-up processes that the African youths can actually adopt that would ensure or that they monitor the progress that is being made concerning their demands?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. Like I mentioned previously, it all has to do with how we, as young people, decide to take a stand. You have to find out what field that is good for you, what field you're comfortable in operating, the sector. Now, what are the deliverables for your sector? What needs to be achieved? Where are you now? This is not a walk in the park. A little bit of work needs to be done from our own end as young people. It's very important to put in the work. It's very important to put in the effort. That's the only way we can ask people to be accountable, because we know what we're talking about, because we know what we're asking for. For example, in Canada, right, as part of the transition to mobility, every ministry, every agency started with at least 5 to 10% of the vehicles procured that particular year was electric. After the next year, went to 25% to 50%. Now today, every single agency, every vehicle procured must be 100% electric. This is because active steps were taken. So for us, we're working hand in hand with legislatures to try and find a law, to try and do something that is workable, that every ministry, every agency, every government institution must at least dedicate 10%, 20% of its budget for vehicles to electric. It's not easy, but we are ready to work hand in hand over a period of time to accomplish this. If a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, we've accomplished this, it is because of the work that we've put in. Likewise, in every field that young people are operating in, whether it's climate change, whether it's, in terms of water, preservation of the seas, whether it's oil spillage, whatever it is that you're involved in, what are the deliverables? What do you want out of it? Where do you see this going in 5 years, in 10 years? How can you ensure that that is done properly? Now, the skill, the quality, and the character that you bring to this matters. As young people, we have to have a focus. We have to have what drives us, what we want to achieve. When you have this focus, then you're able to call to accountability the leaders that have been positioned and empowered to guide our country, to guide our nations, and to guide our continent. That is the critical thing. Also, young people across countries and continent-wide need to start to engage themselves. We need to have a forum for communication. We need to have a forum for interacting with leaders, not just from our own individual countries, but other leaders from other African countries. By the time we foster this relationship between ourselves and we show that collectively we stand the same, then I believe that the leaders, both locally in Africa and internationally, will begin to see. And most development is propelled by both government and private sector. So government needs to take an active role, and the private sector as well needs to take an active role. And the private sector is mainly dominated by a lot of young people, especially in Africa, especially in fintech space, in a lot of spaces you see technology, a lot of things you see young people doing extremely well. 7 of the 10 unicorns in Africa are Nigerian companies. People like Moneypoint just raised about $100 million because they know what they want as young people. So as young people too, we need to know what we want. We need to know what we're fighting for, and we need to know how we're going to go about accomplishing it. You cannot sit down and say you want results, but you haven't communicated the results. There's no action plan. There's no step-by-step plan on how to reach it. So these things need to be incorporated in our daily activities. We need to know how to accomplish what we're setting out to do. So if it's in terms of you want a better nation, sustainability, some of the companies are heavily polluting. You have to find the agencies that are responsible for that. You have to work hand in hand to be able to either offset their carbon credit or find a way to mitigate it. There's profitability in everything you do. So we have to find a profitable way of accomplishing that goal while benefiting our nation, our country, our ecology. Everything depends on us. It really depends on what young people do, how we choose to determine our future. No one can ride your back except you bend and put your back for them to ride. That's it. So if we want to achieve things, we have to stand up and know what we want to achieve. But if we lay back and we complain, then the laws will be passed and we have no influence in them. The current situation, whatever it is that is unfavorable to young people, will continue because we've not taken an active part in it. And like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of young parliamentarians, especially in Nigeria. I'd say maybe 20 to 25% of the people in office in the House of Representatives are 40 and below. So what are they doing? How have you influenced the young people in office to help you make that decision? A simple conversation would guide them. So some of these conversations are not happening on a high level. This is why implementation is very difficult, because government usually makes policies based on the people around that are advising them, So if you have the right people advising government, then government will take the right step. And that is what we want. We want a better nation. We want a better country. We want to spend less on medical bills and more on things that are more beneficial for our families, for our country, for whatever it is that we do. And the only way we can do this is by adopting sustainability in everything we do. So take part. I encourage young people today, any young person listening to this, know that the power is in your hands. Only you can make that difference. No one can make the difference for you. If you're willing to take a stand, you're willing to believe in what you believe in and work hard towards it, regardless of the challenges, you will accomplish it. All the people who have accomplished things in life have one thing in common: hard work and dedication to the cause. That's it, simple. So you wake up every day, you work hard on whatever it is that you're doing, go to bed, wake up the next day and repeat it. And you add this up over a period of time and you see that you've actually accomplished something tremendous, something unbelievable. So that's why I'd like people to use this as an opportunity to see that it's possible to do anything that you wish to do. You can accomplish it, Don't let anyone dissuade you or tell you that it can't be done, If you see what we're doing in the e-mobility sector in Nigeria, where people believe that, there's no light, so why should you have electric vehicles? Today, a lot of people are turning every day to EVs. It is because of a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding and the push by the private sector. So we've been able to do this, and it's not the biggest, but we're aiming to be the biggest. So what do you want to accomplish? That's the real question.
All right, great. Really, really great. Thank you so much, Prince Mustapha Audu. All right, because of our time, I will just take one more from Okotie Wemi and, of course, from Israel. So, Wemi, I want to ask you about climate financing. Now, considering the history of climate financing, there was this time where Western countries came together and said they were going to support the African continent, seen as they're the least contributors. But eventually, along the line, we realized that Africa cannot exactly put 100% trust on these countries. So my question to you is, when it comes to climate financing, I know that to some extent African countries are still dependent on the Western countries, but do you think that it's something we can come together to achieve on our own without any external interference?
Thank you. That's a very hard question. Hard question to not. But then I don't think any country has ever been developed aid. Aid has never developed any country. So at the end of the day, just like Prince Mustapha was advising the youth, Africa and Nigeria, we need to take a bull by the horn, and we need to make sacrifices to get our country to where we want it to be. But aid is just some pushing and support, but really support from the Western countries can only help. But at the end of the day, we have to take our destiny into our own hands. But I'll just stretch a bit. There's been a lot of debate about this. This COP has been called the Finance COP because of several discussions that have happened over time. where the global north have this, I mentioned loss and damage initially, where some research show that the global north had polluted our environment. The historical data show that they've emitted more greenhouse gases than the global south historically, and then the global south is saying they want to be developed and about climate change. And so that's where this funding came about, where the global north is paying or supporting the global south to get developed without polluting, and that's where the concept of sustainable development came in the first place. Now, this discussion has been happening for a long time, where the global north promised certain amount of money, but then, like we have been saying, and I really like some of the things Mr. said, nobody can do anything for you. Actually, you have to take things into your hands. Most of the funding that the global north have promised between 2011 and 2020, 5%, only 5% of those funds were grants. And then 61% of those funds were actually loans. And then we have financing other forms. And so if most countries just get excited, oh, this money is from climate finance, and you take that money and you're not sure what you're going to do with it, that's how some of our countries go into debt. So at the end of the day, Africa needs to take its destiny in its hands, take its climate initiatives and intervention into its own hands and run with them. And at the end of the day, nobody can do anything. We know, there's a saying, the people who are close to the problem are the ones who can actually help with the solution and are the ones who have the better chance of knowing the solution. We are in Africa, we are Africans, we know what our problem is, and when we look deep inside ourselves, look deep inside our systems, create stronger systems, we will find solutions to develop Africa in a clean way going forward and for a sustainable generation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Uwemi. Now, finally, let me get Israel's opinion on this. If you were to project what the future, say the next 5 years, will look like, what do you think your expectations personally are, especially considering all these summits, the climate change summit that we've had and the discussions that have been ongoing?
Yeah, thank you so much. 5 years time, what I see happening, what I expect to be happening is that we have a lot of actual actions in terms of climate finance, like Uwemi has said, because it's been like I said earlier, it's been like almost rhetoric and talk, about like promises that I would have financed this, would finance that, but there's not been like a lot of action in that regard. In 5 years, I see the global north actually coming to ensure that there is that availability of financing, because the large or the bulk of problem in Africa in terms of climate action, beyond just capacity building, is actually financing, because our focus would be more of adaptation, because many communities are vulnerable to climate change across many sectors and in many regards. So it's important that there's enough financing to help cushion the impact of climate change. And beyond that, I also expect that the government do a lot of more to ensure that climate action is contextual to Africa. Today we have, the NDC, and that's a very good document, but when it comes to actually implementing stuff that work, there has to be, state government, local government taking the beats across the sectors to ensure that there is contextual implementation. Communities have to be largely involved. Like Uwemi said, locally led interventions are those that actually work and are sustainable in the long run. So we have to ensure that those who are the most vulnerable are actively involved. And beyond just their voices being heard, they are part of the designing of solutions that work for their communities. And thirdly, I think there should be a lot of more climate education. We have been having talks of integrating climate change action into the curriculum across primary, secondary, tertiary. That should be done. It should be done so that more people can be involved, more people can be involved in climate change. Because today we have people who are not aware okay, or they are aware and they have no interest. Last year, we had a research across Nigeria trying to gauge the perception of the public on climate change. And we found that over 80% of people, both youth, adults, are aware of climate change, but there's no corresponding interest to take action because they feel that there are other more important priorities. Some people say, I can't eat, or I'm poor, I can't even cook with solar or something like, and they're trying to get me to stop cutting firewood. So the priority has to be that, okay, let's balance climate action development. Let's educate people to know why it's important. Because if we keep pushing to them policies, they will see it as something outside. They won't get involved. So we must get them aware, educate them, and get them involved in the design of the solutions. So, like I've said, first thing is financing must be beyond commitment, promises. That's to be actual money coming through to the global south. Secondly, climate education has to be mainstream, primary, secondary education, and tertiary, and then awareness across the board. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Well, that's the much we can take, gentlemen, but I want to really, really appreciate you for your time and for sharing your thoughts on climate change actions. Thank you so much, Israel Olaniyo, the co-founder, Youth for Sustainable Development Action Africa, joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you also to Prince Mustafa Aldu, the CEO, Electric Motor Vehicle Company in Baku, Azerbaijan at the COP29 summit. And of course, thank you to Okotie Wayimi, Clean Air Program Manager at Azerbaijan as well at this summit. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us. Well, this is all we can take on the show for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Fanua Afrika. These are continuous conversations that should be had, especially regarding how they affect the youth across the African continent. And we're hoping for positive outcomes, especially from the COP29 summit. Well, join us again in our subsequent episodes as we discuss and try to make sense of the situations that the youth are decrying all the time, and of course, finding solutions to some of these challenges on the African continent that are facing the youth. My name is Blessings Mosugu. It's been an absolute pleasure being your host. See you again in our next episode. Do have a lovely day.